Chris Paul willing to sacrifice? The answer to that question determines the Warriors' ceiling next season, because none of this works if he's not willing to put his pride to the side and do what's best for the team. By now, I think most of us have seen a clip of Chris Paul clapping back at the reporter that insinuated he's coming off the bench.
Coming off the bench, playing with the second unit, what do you think of their depth, their bench players that you might be playing alongside?
You coaching?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what the situation is going to be yet. You know what I mean? So I think that'll be for us to figure out once we get going.
You've never come off the bench.
Yo, this dude is hilarious. After 18 years in the league, he's still an a-hole. He's obviously holding out hope he can start next to Steph, Clay, Wiggins, and Draymond. But realistically, that unit's too damn tiny starting games. It's one thing to go small with Steph when he's surrounded by a bunch of 6'6" to 6'8" dudes, like the Warriors have traditionally done throughout the dynasty. When you think about dudes like Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston, Andrew Wiggins, Otto Porter, Harrison Barnes, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green, all of them have one main thing in common. They're all relatively like size. It gave the defense enough defensive versatility to switch everything. But at 6'0", Chris Paul obviously doesn't offer that type of length to make those small ball defensive lineups functional. It's just even more ground Draymond and Wiggins would have to make up defensively to compensate for his shortcomings, pun intended. At the ripe age of 38, it's time for Chris Paul to take a long, hard look at himself in the mirror and face some honest truths about where he's at in his career. You're still a good player, no one's denying that. As old as he is, right now as things stand, he's still a better player than Jordan Poole. So I'm not saying he's a bum, but he's obviously past his prime. This isn't a situation like Steph Curry, where he's 35 years old, or arguably, he's better than he was at 25 years old. Nah, CP's nowhere near the player he was 10 years ago. On this team, he shouldn't be starting. Matter of fact, it's going to be games where not only should he not be starting, but he shouldn't be closing either. It's scenarios where I can see Looney, GP2, Dario Saric, or even Kuminga being better options to close as the fifth guy next to Steph, Clay, Wiggins, and Draymond on any given night. Now in a vacuum, CP3 is better than all those dudes, but the days of him being penciled in as a lock to close are over. There's going to be games where having CP out there next to Steph isn't the best option. CP's 6 foot flat, and Steph's 6'2", and at ages 38 and 35 respectively, those two closing games every night as your defensive backcourt doesn't sound like a recipe for success. Now, offensively, they'll be fine, but the defense is where the problem is. Now, I'm sure there'll be some matches where they can get away with it, but not every night. It's one thing to say you're willing to sacrifice, but how much are you really bought in when Curtis decides to close a Looney over you for more rebounding? Or GP2 for better point of attack defense? When Kuminga and Moody are having those games where they're out there hooping, what you gonna do? Take him out even if Chris Paul's struggling? Yeah, I don't know about that. But we all know CP3's a prideful dude. In his 1,214 career games played, he's never come off the bench once, not even while coming back from injuries. Steve Kerr better not let Chris Paul bully him into starting that tiny lineup. But nah, I got faith in Steve. I don't think he signs off on starting games that small. Chris Paul better get the program. The Warriors won't hesitate to move him at the deadline if he starts creating tension. Warriors GM Mike Dunleavy made it clear they traded for Chris Paul not just because he's an on-court upgrade this season, but because he offers financial flexibility going forward. He's essentially an expiring contract. Let him come into next season crying about his role. I promise you he'll be gone by the deadline. So it's in his best interest to make whatever sacrifice is needed, or he'll find himself on the 6th team in the last 7 years. Now, let's operate under the assumption that CP is bought in. He embraced his 6-man role, and he's really making an extra effort to incorporate the young guys. Here's a few second unit combinations I want to see the Warriors deploy to maximize Chris Paul. Now, first off, I want to say, I'm not a fan of Chris Paul Draymond lineups. Both of them on the court takes away from what the other does best on offense, having the ball in their hands and making plays for others. It's too much redundancy between the two. On top of that, Chris Paul needs to play with a big that can serve as either an interior finisher and or a lob threat, or a stretch big that can knock down threes in the pick and pop situations. Draymond does neither. On the other hand, Draymond needs to play with a guard that can operate off ball, and that's not Chris Paul's strong suit, which is why the Warriors should stick with pairing Draymond with Steph and having Chris Paul paired with either Saric, Kuminga, or Trayce Jackson-Davis in the second unit. That way, between Saric, Kuminga, and Trayce, CP will always have someone who's either an interior finisher or a pick and pop threat to run a 2-man game with. But like I was saying earlier, it's 3 lineup combinations featuring Chris Paul with mostly bench units I want to get into. The first one is Chris Paul, Gary Payton II, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and Dario Saric. This lineup is very possibly one of the main bench combinations we'll see this year. This combo gives Chris Paul the option to either go pick and roll with Kuminga or pick and pop with Saric as a stretch 5. Defensively, GP2 takes the biggest threat on the other team. Kuminga takes the second. Almost everyone here can hit a shot. GP2's hit or miss, but if he's the worst shooter in the lineup, that's not bad. The next lineup is Chris Paul, Klay Thompson, Jonathan Kuminga, Dario Saric, and Trayce Jackson-Davis. This lineup has Klay subbing out early and coming in with the second unit to pair with Chris Paul. You also have Saric stretching the floor with JK and Trayce as play finishers. The next one is Chris Paul, Klay Thompson, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and Dario Saric. Now, everyone in this lineup can actually hit a shot. Chris Paul has the option of getting to either a pick and roll game with Kuminga or a pick and pop with Saric. Then you have Moody and Klay spacing the floor. The Dario Saric signing was more essential than people might realize. Not because he's some elite role player, but because he makes a lot of these lineups viable with his ability to stretch the floor at 6'10". He offers versatility Golden State just didn't have last season after losing Otto Porter and Amihan Bielisa. Oftentimes, the Warriors were forced to run lineups with Klay Thompson or Moses Moody at the 4. As you can guess, stretch 4 Klay lineups were ass. Look, I love Klay, but I don't ever want to see a stretch 4 Klay lineup ever again. Last season was rough times for sure. Anyways, that's all I got for y'all. If you enjoy the content, support the channel by hitting that subscribe button. It'd be much appreciated. I'll holler at you on the next one. Peace.